Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm bringing to life a whimsical polar bear with a walrus-style mustache, a portrait of the distinguished Mr. Atwood. This is a high-speed drawing tutorial using General's black and white charcoal pencils on Pastelmat paper. Along the way, I'll be sharing tips on shading, texture, and values while giving you a glimpse into Mr. Atwood's charming backstory. If you're new here, consider subscribing. I share illustration tutorials, whimsical characters, and creative insights. Onto this outline drawing, I'm starting to add the basic white fur color using a General's white charcoal pencil. It's also called a white pastel pencil. You can see here as I'm just lightly shading this in, just adding actually very light pressure of this white pastel pencil. I'm trying to go in the direction of the fur. Just imagine where the polar bear's fur grows or any pet you're doing and just move in that direction. It's really important as you continue to add layers and you add more depth and more shading, and you'll see me adding the black charcoal pencil into this shortly. It's really important to try to mimic the direction of the fur. It gives a much more realistic, even if you're doing a whimsical illustration or more of a cartoon type piece, just adding these techniques in will really help kind of blend that combination of realism into your illustration work. And it doesn't have to be photorealistic, but giving this a sense of the basic just angles of the fur. And that's why you'll see the pencil generally going in the direction where the polar bear's fur grows. And there I just added a little bit of the black charcoal. Adding the values of white and black charcoal is going to continue to change that spectrum of value from either pure white or close to pure white, as this is on a nearly black paper, to adding values of gray, and then you can get completely black when you add the charcoal pencil by itself. Just adding in, because it's a longer walrus style mustache, I'm adding in longer pencil strokes. If the fur is short, keep the pencil strokes short. If the fur is long, or you've got longer wavy hair like some dogs do, and maybe a fox might have more wavy hair, or a lion, you want to add those lengths in. You wouldn't want to use short pencil strokes if you're making long fur, and just as you don't want to add long pencil strokes if they're just short bristly fur. So keeping the pencil strokes very similar to the actual animal's fur makes a big difference. So you've got direction you want to keep aware of, and you've got fur length. And then we'll work on shading, highlights, and adding all those pieces in. So this character is Mr. Atwood, and he's a polar bear who once studied banking but had found his true calling as a baker. So he settled into a coastal town where the salty sea breezes mingled with the scent of his freshly baked bread. I imagined him like on Cape Cod, specifically up towards Truro and Provincetown. And his favorite treat of all the breads and baked goods he made was sourdough drizzled with maple syrup. And as we zoom in a bit closer here, that really short fur just on the top of the nose, just adding very short, small pencil strokes to try to mimic that. And we'll keep coming back in and adding more layers to these sections. Just keep in mind this is a very small piece. It measures 5 inches by 5 inches. So we're working really small here on some of these details. If you were to do a larger piece, say 12 by 12 or even larger, you really could get more details in because you're working with larger eyes, larger nose. You're seeing more details in the fur, and we would approach that a little bit differently just because you're really focusing here in a small piece as much as you can on values, getting the lights light, getting the darks dark. That's what someone's going to see. If this was in a room, in a small space maybe, framed, people are going to see the piece as it is. Like if you're looking in the small thumbnail sample here in the upper left corner of the screen, they're going to see that. You're going to see the values are going to stand out. If those values are accurate, your mind is going to fill in the rest. Bringing personality into a character in a portrait like this, it's all about texture, depth, and expression. And the mustache was a fun, whimsical challenge. It adds to his wise, old world charm, and just, again, adding that whimsy, making it something other than just a polar bear that you might see out in the wild. This is a character we're creating, and we want to pique someone's curiosity about wondering maybe what his story is and why he's wearing this like bow tie and jacket. Maybe that would be more closely associated with the late 1800s. The walrus style mustache is another personality that he has. So it hopefully draws the interest in where you want to know a little bit more about him. Let's just dive into some charcoal drawing tips and what I use to create realism and depth. Tip one is use soft layers and build up your tones gradually to avoid harsh lines. This is a polar bear, and we're adding fur, we're adding softness and texture, light and shadows. If this was like a hard glass object, steel maybe, you would have more harsh lines in that, where there are vast contrasts between where light is hitting. But this is a polar bear, so we're approaching him a little different. And tip number two is work dark to light. This keeps lighting and the highlights crisp and adds contrast. There are exceptions to this. You can work light to dark occasionally, especially if it's a darker object. But in this case, we've already got the dark background, so we're starting with a dark background, adding a depth of a white General's charcoal, light pencil. This is a medium to hard white pencil. The charcoal that we're using is a soft pencil, and that just spreads the charcoal a lot easier, blends really well. So you, a general rule is think dark to light. And tip number three, pay attention to the fur direction. As I mentioned earlier, not every strand needs to be perfect, but getting the flow just right adds realism. So it's a generalization. Look to the lights and darks, look for the flow, look for the general direction, and that will help add some realism to a character. Whether you're going for hyper-realism or whether you're going for something more whimsical, you still want to utilize those types of rules. They do apply if you're looking to blend a little bit more than something might look so cartoony. And just want to mention a common mistake is overblending. Keeping some sharp textures is key to realism. The contrast between light and shadows makes the fur pop. This is pretty subtle here, but you can see in the left of the polar bear, the upper right, the upper left is actually lighter than the parts in the lower right quadrant. So it's not so stark that he's like out in the sun, but maybe there's soft lighting more above him and to the left. And you'll see that as this progresses, where the light and the shadow are hitting. So be aware of where your light source is. Sometimes it's subtle and sometimes more stark, but this one is, we wanted to cast some of those shadows a little bit more onto his right side. And as I did mention, I'm using General's black and white charcoal pencils, and this is Pastelmat paper. Pastelmat paper has almost like a texture to it, more so than other papers. It's really hard to describe, but if you can find Pastelmat, try working with either pastel pencils or black and white charcoal pencils, and the amount of layers you can continue add and refine is incredible. It doesn't saturate where you can't add any more textures as you're going along. So that's what I'm using, is the very dark Pastelmat paper in this case. And charcoal is an amazing medium. It's affordable, it's fast, it's forgiving. If you make an area a little too dark and you realize when you step back it should be a little bit lighter, you add some of the white charcoal lightly over it, and you're going to find those values of how light and how dark you want it. And if you're new to art, charcoal's a great way to practice values and shading. Before you even get into color, just understand where the light is. Understand the subtleties between how dark and how light something is. Don't be afraid to experiment and go darker than you think and lighter than you think. That's often a mistake that a lot of beginners have, is they're afraid that something's going to look too dark or too light. And the only way you can really learn that is by doing it, stepping back, analyzing your work, and then making some changes. And I hope I can give you enough techniques and tricks and just the approach I have. And I hope that helps out. And one of the best things is about being able to add these layers. And you can always darken shadows or lift highlights as you refine your piece. So, you see how I'm adding just that little bit to the button. I'm adding more to his vest. The vest is going to be more of a gray color and his jacket's going to be darker. So we want to isolate those, and I can go back and forth and keep refining that. I really want to get the jacket looking smooth because it has a different approach than the fur does. But you'll see when you work on different pieces of your own how you can add these different techniques. And you can really see as these textures keep getting added in, starting to add a little bit more realism, a little bit more depth to the amounts of fur. And even, for example, where the ears are, you have to work a little bit with that, as the ear is an opening and there's some darkness to it, but it's not completely dark. So you just fill in a little bit more. And same with the jacket as we move along, just trying to add where some of the light might be hitting that texture. And just adding a little bit more to the collar, trying to smooth out the collar a bit because we don't want that to look like the fur. So small circular motions will give a more polished look. For a lot of fabrics that works, or a smooth surface. And notice how over on the right side where there's a little bit more shading, we're adding a little bit more of that black charcoal's pencil, just adding a little bit more darkness there. And we'll just keep going over and refining. And that's what I hope you do for any of your work if you're going to take on pieces and you're exploring working with charcoal, black and white, just to have fun with it and experiment. Don't feel you've made a mistake. You can work around that. Have an intention of what you would like to do, but you can see this is a really forgiving medium to work with. And just want you to feel comfortable when you're making your own pieces that you're going to experiment. You're going to learn so much just by experimenting on your own pieces. And with these basic tools and techniques I'll give you, you can just be creating pieces on your own. And we're really refining those lights and darks, adding some of the little bits of fur, just trying to dial in those lightest pieces, some of the blending, some of the darker pieces. The eyes really were a combination of just subtly using some light into the dark, and that gives the eyes a little bit more of a realistic look without making them look like they're standing out too strongly. They want to be set in. There's not a lot of light hitting the polar bear in this position, but just giving the sense that there are eyes there and they have depth to them. Same with the nose. The nose isn't just a big black button. The nose holes will be the darkest. Around the nose will be very dark, but you have to remember wherever the light's hitting it, that's going to reflect too. So we've got some lighter pieces also, lighter sections around the nose, and the mustache too. We keep refining with the dark charcoal pencil. Just really trying to zero in on where those darkest pieces are, where the most shadow is. And still refining these remaining areas, smoothing out the jacket, just putting in some final touches really. Just there's always some pieces you're going to want to just work with a little bit more, get a few things as you step back. And I do recommend stepping back and moving away from it. Don't work so close to your piece and just live there. Actually get up, stretch, take a little break from it, and look at it from a distance. Look at what needs to be modified, what needs to be changed a bit, and then come back and work on those pieces. If you're too close, you start losing the actual perspective. Realize how most people are going to be looking at your piece generally from a bit of a distance and not right up close, like 3 inches away from it as you're staring at your fine details. And with the addition of the signature at the end, Mr. Atwood is complete. So I enjoy how his personality shines through. I think he's wise, kind, and maybe a little bit mischievous. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What's your favorite type of bread? Let me know below. If you enjoyed this tutorial, hit like and it really helps the channel to grow, and subscribe for more whimsical characters and tutorials and creative storytelling. I'll soon be relaunching my Patreon page where you'll get real-time drawing tutorials, behind-the-scenes insights, and exclusive content. Stay tuned, I'll update the description with a link when it's live. Thanks again for watching.